So, I'm doing this series on the secret powers of meditation. And I initially thought of 10. I've actually got about another half dozen that I might play with later. But I had 10, and today is the 10th in the series. And so this, you can see them all here: the power of silence, the power of breath, the power of action. And each week we've been visiting these: the power of thought, the power of presence, the power of sound, the power of perspective, the power of intuition, the power of connection. That was last week. And this last session in this series, the power of love, is what we're going to be exploring today. And I want to start off by telling you a little experience I had with related to meditation. I'd been practicing this meditation for a pretty long time. At this point, I guess it was about 8 years ago. So I've been meditating regularly for about 45 years now. But I've been teaching for about 42 years or 41 years. So I met this friend. I made friends with this guy in LA, and he was in the film industry and quite a very creative, accomplished fellow. And he had been also meditating for about 40 years. He was doing a different kind of meditation, and we were discussing the difference. And I was familiar with what he's doing. I'm not going to say what it was. I think I've told some of you this story before, but I sort of, it's not very cool for me to to criticize some other kind of meditation. But I do want to contrast this for you. So I won't say what technique it was, what the name of it was, but he was doing a mantra-based meditation, and I'd actually learned it myself years ago. And he was asking me, well, what's the difference between what I'm doing and what you practice and what you're teaching? And I explained this to him, that we do this meditation, and it was a pretty long conversation, but essentially I was saying, yeah, we use a mantra as you do, but we really focus on the meaning behind the mantra, and we're really trying to connect to this feeling of love within ourselves. And there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of very central to our practice, that idea that the mantra and the meaning of the mantra, the feeling behind it, is very important. And what he was practicing, they use a mantra, but they don't attach any meaning to the mantra. And he had been into it for a long time, as I said. He'd been meditating for 40 years. And when we'd been talking about this for a while, he looked a little concerned. And he looked at me and he says, gosh, he says, it's kind of like I've been doing more or less what you've been doing for all my life, but with the love taken out. And he was, I mean, I couldn't say that, right? But he was spot on. That's exactly the difference. And it just reminded me of this thing that I've understood it for a long time, but it just reminded me again that what you focus on in meditation is very important. It makes a huge difference. Because, there's this saying in the philosophy of Tantra, which is very ancient, and it's understood in modern psychology, and it's understood in pop psychology, that what you focus on tends to become real. And now what we've been able to understand through recent research in neuroscience is this actually shows up in the brain as new neural pathways. If you keep focusing on a particular idea, that will actually change the physical structure of your brain. So it's like this concept has been confirmed, if you like, by neuroscience. So that's that was my hearing it back from somebody else. The difference between meditating on something that maybe not very specific, or something that doesn't have this very sort of beautiful idea at its center, just meditating on something else and meditating on something really sublime. There's a very big difference. So when I was thinking about this whole idea of the power of love, there's a lot to be said about this. Thousands of books, probably hundreds of thousands of books have been written about this idea, because it could be said that this is the primary motivating power for human beings. We hear so many stories about, some rich and powerful person on their deathbed, and what do they regret, or what do they wish they'd done more of? You don't find them wishing they'd spent more time at the office. I've never heard that. They typically say, well, I wish I'd spent more time with my children. I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I wish I'd been kinder, because, you can't take all the wealth and celebrity with you. And what really mattered to them, they realized perhaps a little late, what really mattered to them is the people they love, the things they love. What really matters to us as humans is love. It's very central to our being. And it's, it's important, and it motivates us. So those of you who have attended my classes will know that I'm more than a little obsessed with the Lord of the Rings. It was more or less my Bible as I grew up. This was the story that really influenced my values, because I rejected Christianity at a very early age, and there was a gap, there was a hole in my life for some story that would instruct me and give me an idea of what life was about, what was important and what wasn't, and really help me to develop my own values. And there's a scene from The Lord of the Rings. This is, of course, from the film, but it's actually one of the points in the film where the dialogue in the film is directly from the book. So I'm that nerdy. I kind of know when I was watching the films, I knew pretty much exactly which bits were directly from the original and which were the script writers. So it's almost like confessing my obsession. But this really struck me. So there's this conversation between, the wise mentor figure, Gandalf the wizard, and the young hobbit who's on this mission to destroy the evil ring of power. And they're being followed by this very kind of pitiable but really quite evil character. His name is Gollum. And the young hobbit Frodo is saying, it's a pity that Bilbo, his uncle, actually didn't kill Gollum when he had a chance, because he's so evil. He's murdered people. He's really kind of a decrepit figure. And the wizard, he says, pity. It was pity that stayed his hand. Of course, this is a very clever double entendre, because using the word pity in two meanings at once. But he goes on to say that, even the wise, he actually addresses the issue of capital punishment here, because he says, there are many people who deserve to die, because Frodo says, but he deserved to die. And Gandalf said, there are many people who deserve to die that live, and there are many that die that deserve to live. And he says, do you have the power to give somebody their life back if, they didn't deserve to die? And of course, nobody does, but ultimately God. So this is actually a religious book. And Gandalf said, well, then you don't have the right to, condemn someone, because you don't have the power to give life back to those who die and don't deserve it. So this was kind of his statement about capital punishment, effectively. But he then said that, this nobody, even the wise, don't know what everyone's role is, what the purpose of everybody. So this figure, Gollum, who was apparently worse than useless, a really evil fellow, he ended up being the one who actually destroyed the ring and saved the universe. At this wonderful twist at the end. And he didn't do it deliberately. He did it by accident. But so Gandalf has this amazing moment of intuition and foresight, where he sees that, in effect, this is my interpretation of Lord of the Rings. The key theme is that it's compassion. It's the compassion shown by the wizard and by the uncle of Frodo to spare the life of this character that enabled them to defeat the all-powerful Lord of the Rings. And that to me is a very important theme, that the power of compassion, the power of love, is more than we can imagine. It's more than we realize. So there's one of my favorite stories, probably my favorite story, but this is one of the sort of sub themes, or perhaps the main sub theme. And there are lots of arguments about what Lord of the Rings is really about. There are probably, you could argue for 10 different themes quite easily. So I'm revisiting a bit of material from earlier in this course because it is very relevant to this idea here that I have a new friend. He's a very clever fellow. His name's David. And he wrote his PhD on the subject of caring about people in the workplace. So he's a kind of economist, management theory figure, and his book is about the importance of caring for the people you're working with, and caring about what you're doing in your work, and how that makes a huge difference. And I thought this is pretty interesting because it's almost like this is and his book's actually called Dare to Care, which I don't think it's a very good title, but the point is really good. So he's saying Dare to Care is sort of like, it's a little bit frowned upon to talk about things like caring and compassion and being nice in the world of business. And to me, that's enormously tragic, because most people spend most of their lives at work, often in some kind of business. And if you're not allowed to talk about love, or if it's sort of a little bit heretical, and you have to be daring to talk about caring and love and compassion and being kind to people in the environment where you spend a third of your life, this is, to me, enormously problematic. And he does make this point, and we're actually planning on doing some work together to try and address this problem in some companies. And so our worldview, it's kind of what we consider to be important. And in the worldview of materialism, which it's kind of the dominant worldview these days in overall, is this that everything is composed of matter, the sort of the scientific worldview, if you like, sort of conservative scientific worldview. Not that all scientists believe this, not at all, but the orthodox scientific view is that matter is the basis of reality. And the conclusion that tends to come from that is that only matter matters. And that, unfortunately, it tends to be what a lot of people seem to think, that money is more important than people. I happen to have the opposite view, and I imagine that all of you do as well. But this is a very dominant way of seeing things, and I think it's tremendously harmful and dangerous. So worldviews matter. Your sort of basic idea of what is important and what's not, what matters and what doesn't, is tremendously important, because it affects all of your behavior, your whole value system, and all the behavior that arises from that. Now, there is a very different worldview that is historically been very widespread. It's less common now, but that is a view that the world is a kind of, it's called idealism. It's the idea that the world is a kind of illusion. And some people interpret Buddhism this way. They interpret certain spiritual teachings, some of the interpretations of the Vedic teachings, or some of the spiritual teachings of India. The view seems to be that actually the world is a kind of dream, and that it doesn't really matter, and that what really matters is, the only thing that matters ultimately is God or the divine, and that that's what we should be focusing on. And this really has influenced entire cultures, especially the culture of India. And some philosophers have drawn a connection between the extreme poverty that's so widespread in India and the extreme economic injustice, extreme disparity of wealth. India is an incredibly wealthy country, but there's an amazing degree of poverty. There's enormous wealth differences, and a lot of suffering historically of the poor. And the philosophers say, well, why didn't people do something about this? Because the prevailing worldview was that it doesn't matter. It'll all be resolved in heaven. It's part of their karma. It's a misuse of the concept of karma, actually. They're destined to do that, and eventually they'll find God and everything will be okay. So don't worry about it. And that is a real worldview of a lot of people, and has been for hundreds, if not thousands of years in some cultures. So I have problems with that as well, as you can tell. So what is the worldview of Tantra, which is the philosophy of Ananda Marga that I follow, and is, I would say, the deeper philosophy of traditional yoga, the sort of the Tantra yoga, or the sort of this, I would say, a more holistic worldview. So Tantra, well, I thought about this, and I have an answer to this, and it was so kind of neat that I thought I'd like to get a T-shirt made like that, but I never got around to it. But then I thought to search, and I discovered that someone else had already done it. According to Tantra, everything matters. Okay. And what does that mean? It means that certainly all living things matter. Every ant and every little tree and all people, we all matter, because we matter to ourselves. My life's important to me, but the ant's life is important to the ant as well. So this, and not just ants, even, waterfalls and planets and, cars for that matter, robots. I have a song about being nice to robots. Everything matters. This is the worldview of Tantra, because we see everything as a manifestation of cosmic or divine consciousness. So this is not just a microphone. I don't know if you can see my microphone. It is the cosmic mind imagining a microphone, and that's what makes it real, and that's what makes it important. Because everything is conscious. Everything is made of consciousness. So I like this idea. And I think it's very, very real. And there's a whole lot of really interesting sort of deeper philosophy in Tantra that goes into that. But I want to make this point, because what that implies is that we're supposed to love everybody, and we're supposed to love everything. That's kind of what it's about. And that's what we're supposed to be learning. And that gives me a sense of direction and purpose. Here's two of my very favorite people, especially Helen Keller. You probably know her story. I remember her story from when I was very young, way away in New Zealand, even, of course she was American. And just in case you don't know who she was, I'll recap it very quickly. Let's just hear in the chat who knows the story of Helen Keller. You can, I'd love to hear from you. You can switch on your mic and tell us if you like. You might have read her book. It's called The Story of My Life. She wrote a number of books, but that's her. Yeah. Tell us.
I think you told us a story, or at least I remember you telling us a story.
Possibly.
Weeks ago, and she I think she dated the Tagore guy.
No, you're getting mixed up with somebody else.
Oh, am I? Okay.
She met Tagore, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, she did. But what's special about her?
Didn't she wrote? I don't know. There's like so many famous quotes by her.
That's true. But the really, let's see if anyone else can remember Helen Keller. What set her apart? Why is she like historically famous? There's a clue here. Why is she touching Charlie Chaplin's face?
Well, you're not sharing screen, I don't think.
Oh, really? That could be why.
But Helen Keller,
yeah.
I think she had an illness that cost her ability to see and hear. Yet she had a special teacher that learned how to help her communicate.
Okay, now you can see her, right?
Yes.
That is true. That would have given it away. That is absolutely right. So she was both. She became very ill when she was very young. She lost her sight and her hearing, and she hadn't yet learned to speak. So she was literally deaf, dumb, and blind as a very small child, and she became incredibly frustrated and her parents found her this amazing teacher, Anne Sullivan. And there's this amazing moment in her book where there's a moment when Anne is trying to communicate with her through touch, because that's her only, well, she can smell and taste, but touch was the most functional, effective way of communicating. And she was trying to teach her to write. And she would write the letter W on her hand with her finger, and then put her hand under the cold water, under running water. And there was a moment that Helen describes. I think she was 7 when this happened. And there was a moment when she suddenly realized that this feeling meant water, this feeling of this letter on her hand. And she said it was like this revelation, because suddenly she could communicate. She realized it's possible for me to communicate with other people. And she'd been so frustrated, and she was a genius. So her frustration was kind of accentuated because she had this brilliant mind, and she was trapped in this body with disabilities. And she went on to learn, and she eventually, she became a famous writer, and she learned to speak. She became a famous speaker. She went all over the world, and she met presidents, and she was the first deaf and blind person to earn a university degree. She was an amazing woman, and she was deeply spiritual. And she, as you said, there are a lot of incredible quotes from her. And this is one of my favorites, that the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. So, she was, she suffered a lot, but she overcame it. And she was a very saintly person. And she realized the importance of love. And she wrote beautifully about the suffering of the poor. And she said, there was one passage where she was older. She was in New York City, and this was in the time of, would have been the 1930s, I think. And she said she could feel the suffering of all the poor people working in the factories. And it was, they were working in terrible conditions, and it was horrendous. And she could sense it. And she said, I don't like being in the city because I can feel the suffering. And she was an amazing woman. So, power of love. Let's go to another one. So here's a very different personality. One of my youthful, heroes, Che Guevara. And, you may know him as a socialist revolutionary, but actually he was a doctor. And I think he was from Chile, or no, Colombia, or one of the other South American countries. He wasn't from Cuba. But he became a famous revolutionary, and his guerrilla force helped to overthrow the fascist dictatorship in Cuba. But he made this statement. He said, the risk of seeming ridiculous, because he's known as a soldier, as a warrior, and a revolutionary. Let me say that the true revolutionary is guided by a feeling of great love. And he writes in his book, he says, I was a doctor. I became a doctor because I wanted to help people. That was what I felt to be my purpose in life. But I got to a point where I realized I was trying to help all these people that were sick. But the reason they were sick was because they were in poverty. And yet, just a few miles away, there were all these incredibly rich people living in fancy houses, and it was all unnecessary. And I thought, what am I doing here? I can't help all these people as a doctor. I need to change the government. So that became his mission. But I thought this was kind of a neat juxtaposition and a very unusual statement from somebody who's known for his book on guerrilla warfare. There's something called metta meditation. Who's familiar with that? Metta meditation. It's part of Buddhist tradition. Metta means kind of like a combining things together. And so metta meditation is one of the a very beautiful Buddhist technique from the Mahayana side of Buddhism. There are you could say 3 main schools of Buddhism. There's Theravada Buddhism, which is Vipassana is a form of that. You may be familiar with that. It's somewhat atheistic. the Mahayana Buddhism includes Zen and Chan Buddhism in China, and sort of includes Tibetan Buddhism. And this is a little bit cheeky of me, because I'm not really an expert in Buddhism, but to some extent, the Mahayana Buddhism is kind of like the Buddhism with the love inside, with the love included, and the Theravada Buddhism is like the Buddhism with the love taken out. So in Mahayana Buddhism, there's a great emphasis on compassion and on self-sacrifice, and they even have this thing called the Bodhisattva Oath, where the great enlightened beings, they say, I will not accept enlightenment until all of the beings of the universe are enlightened. So they're actually sacrificing the goal of life in order to, out of compassion. So they have this huge emphasis on the importance of compassion and love. So metta meditation is a meditation of kind of like that. I'll walk you through a sort of simplified version of metta meditation. So just close your eyes for a minute. And the idea here is to begin by just becoming aware of your own feeling of existence, and just maybe repeat to yourself, I know that I exist. I can feel that I exist. I sense that. And then feel that, I love being alive. I have a desire to remain alive and continue existing. So I love myself. Maybe I don't love all the things about myself, but my existence, this I love. So you just connect this feeling of love to your sense of self. And then what we're going to do is take that feeling of love and compassion and connect it to the people that in our family, people we know well, close friends. And that's often easier than feeling that you love yourself, depending on your friends, I guess. But I love my friends. So think about your friends and your close family and think, yeah, I love them as well. So you're expanding this circle of those that are included, and the people in your neighborhood, just to feel, okay, they're also part of this circle, a sphere of love that I want to nourish and let it expand. And so that it's not just the people, but the plants and the animals and the birds and the trees and the houses and everything surrounding you. And you're expanding this to touch the people in the city you're in, and beyond that to your country, and beyond that to the world. There's this expanding sphere of love, and you're at the center of it. And it goes beyond this world to the stars. Just rest there for a minute. And then just quietly let yourself come back to this feeling that you're very comfortable with yourself and being connected to this source of love within yourself. And take a breath, and you can open your eyes. So that's a very simplified version of a metta meditation, and that's for me, that's one of the most beautiful practices in Buddhism. Now, this photograph was taken, I think, the year before last, I think, in Bangkok. And Thailand is a Buddhist country. Most people there are Buddhists. Here we have 1 million children meditating, practicing metta meditation. And I think they organize this every year in March. Maybe they did. I'm sure. I don't think they did it this year, of course. But they have this mass, and they're mostly teenagers, maybe high school, but also young children. They have 1 million children meditating together on this idea of. So here their meditation is a little bit different. What they're doing is taking this feeling of love and feeling like they're spreading it out to the world. So like they're giving their love to the world. And they believe that this will help the world. So I want to ask you, do you think it will? And if so, how does it work? Are they kidding themselves? Or is this something, can this actually have an effect? I'm curious to know if any of you have actually practiced the Buddhist meditation before and done it more sort of formally and also. But tell me, the real question is, do you think this has an effect? Are a million school children practicing this meditation on giving compassion, spreading their compassion to the world, just thinking about it? They're not actually going out and doing anything. They're just sitting there and meditating on this idea. Do you think it's going to have any real effect on the world? I'm curious. I'm very curious to know what you think. And, you can turn your mic on if you like. You think it would certainly work. Okay.
I think
Any
it'll have a
idea?
positive effect.
Pardon?
I think it's going to have a positive effect.
How?
Just by the sense, like the way they live their life and the way they interact and interface with the world is coming from a place of love. And if you have that sort of, if you come from that place, when you interact with people, they can sense that and feel that. And I think it lifts them or their spirits up. And I think that would have like you could say like kind of like a domino effect, although it does kind of like taper off, I would imagine, to some extent. But I think the more people that are doing it, the better, and the more powerful effect it'll have.
I have this I want to go and join them sometime. It's like, but I'm probably not allowed in because I'm not a child anymore, at least not on the outside. I agree. I think it's got to generate an amazing feeling. So I think it's certainly, at the very least, it's going to affect them, right? I mean, imagine when you're a kid, if you're 14 or something, you go and you meditate with 1 million people, you're never going to forget that, right? And I'm sure the energy is absolutely amazing. And people write about it and they say, yeah, this is extraordinary. So that's one level, and I'd say that's difficult to question. But I also wonder, of course, and this is kind of what Krishna was referring to, and you're saying thoughts are things, so it must have an effect scientifically. The Microbiota Theory, which is part of Tantra philosophy, might indicate how, maybe. Okay, so what are thoughts of things? What does that mean? Well, yeah, we generate kind of some sort of waveforms with our thoughts. And there is that's a way that maybe this mass meditation could actually have some influence beyond the way it influences the children themselves and the way that they lead their lives into the future. So I would certainly think that. I think there's something there. Very hard to measure. Maybe in the future we'll figure out how to measure that. That'll be interesting. But I'll tell you something that I'm sort of a half skeptic, half I believe weird stuff. So I'm certainly not a materialist, but I used to be. So I like to see evidence of things, and if it really seems like, yeah, then I'll believe something that seems unlikely for sure. But my skeptic comes out because I meet a lot of people who make absurd claims, and they don't make sense, and I know they're not true. So I think it's good to be kind of somewhat rational as well. But I think for me, this is a very real thing. And one of the reasons I believe it is because I've experienced it, not with 1 million people, but I've meditated with 20,000 people and chanted with, 5,000-10,000 people. And the energy is palpable. It's amazing. It's a very, very powerful experience. So I've seen how a large group of people chanting or meditating together can generate this atmosphere. Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, it would, but that might be a way to try and study it. From Todd, thanks. Yeah, maybe we could have statistics about crime and accidents on the day of the meditation. That would be great. I wonder if they're tracking that. Maybe they are. I mean, it's a Buddhist culture. They might like to have some data like that. That'd be cool. One of the things I noticed when this COVID-19 thing came along, and we're all suddenly finding we have to do our group meditations from home. So we're connecting through the internet like we are today, and now it's beginning to feel normal because I've been doing it for 6 months. But when we first started doing it, I was thinking, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, because I'm used to being in a room, we sing together, you can feel the energy, even if there's just 5 or 6 of us. It makes a big difference, especially if some of them are good singers. Or good meditators for that matter. But I thought, we're all in different locations. How is this going to work? Do meditation waves travel through the internet? And I thought probably not. But then something happened that I didn't expect. And that was that from the very first time I participated in an online group meditation, it felt like group meditation, maybe not to such a degree as if we'd been in the room together, but it definitely felt different than meditating on my own. And I have a theory about that, and that is that, I don't really believe that thought waves or meditation waves travel through the internet, but we are connected on another level, which is on a level of where you could say there are levels where the mind, there's a kind of cosmic mind, and there are layers of that. And that's what enables things like telepathy, and which I've experienced many times, and maybe some of you have. So there's another dimension, essentially, a sort of mental levels where we connect. And what I think happens when we're meditating together is that the internet connection acts as a kind of a catalyst or a trigger to create this more subtle connection. And we meditate together on that level, and that's where the experience is kind of shared. That's my theory, anyway, for whatever it's worth. I'm not enough of a scientist to figure out how to prove that, but I think it would be neat to research that.
But okay. I think they've done a study with transcendental meditators in Washington, D.C., where they meditated as a group and directed their peaceful energy, I guess, to lower the crime rate in Washington, D.C. And there was a correlation between the time that they did the meditation and the crime rate actually went down for some number of weeks or whatever. I don't remember the details of the study, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, my experience in India meditating with thousands of people was that, waiting for Baba, that it was very uncomfortable, hot. We were squeezed together. My knees have never been so painful, kind of thing, and where are all these million people going to the bathroom, I don't see the porta potties, but anyway, it was a very uncomfortable experience. Actually, it didn't really generate a lot of peacefulness in myself, or I think the people that I was with were also, kind of uncomfortable. So there's no, maybe a correlation between this deep sense of peace radiating. To me, I tend to think no, on a massive level. Like you, I'd like to see some actual evidence, But I think so you become on a personal level. If people are, doing that ideation on a personal level, it's probably changing them.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just throwing the question out there. We've all got maybe slightly different views on this, but one thing I really do believe strongly is meditating in a group can be very powerful and very beneficial for your own practice and for everybody involved. And as I said, I didn't expect that to translate into online meditation, but to some degree, it certainly seems to. So I found that kind of reassuring, and it's nice. Now I'm doing running like 3 or 4 group meditations and things a week, and organizing more with other teachers. So yeah, we don't feel like we're wasting our time. It's nice. Okay, now this is a really neat mantra. Maybe I should sing this to you. Yeah, why not? Put my guitar along. You got it when it flaunted. So this song is this. I'll run through the translation first. This is perhaps the oldest song in the world. How do you like that? And how do I dare to claim that? So this is a mantra. This is just the first line. I'll sing the whole mantra to you. It's got like 8 lines, I think, maybe more. In Sanskrit, obviously. It comes from the Rig Veda, which is the oldest known scripture, as far as I know, at least. It's thought to be parts of it are thought to be as much as 15,000 years old. So, of course, it was an oral tradition first, because humans didn't invent writing, so far as we know, until what, 4,000 years ago, I think. Certainly not 15. So it was preserved as an oral tradition, memorized, passed on to the next generation, the next and the next, for literally thousands of years. But these scriptures were preserved like that, and most of all the older scriptures were started as oral traditions, of course. So the meaning of this goes kind of like this. It says, so sang means in the proper style. Well, that's the literal meaning. You could also translate it as same or similar. Gachati means movement. Okay, sangachadvang, then moving together. So together they means moving together, to taking care of one another. So moving together in the proper style means to take care of one another and build a strong, well-knit society with no exploitation. Nobody's, no bossism, nobody's oppressing, another group. And the philosophy of Prout, which stands for Progressive Utilization Theory, is based upon this mantra. So Prout is something I'm not doing a class on at the moment, but it's a kind of it's as if you took yoga philosophy and you applied it to socioeconomics, which is pretty cool, because you've got these values and principles, which are, is this principle of that everything matters, and that everyone matters, and that the material world is there for us to utilize to help one another and to uplift everybody and all living things. So but it's a whole socioeconomic theory. There are like 17 books on socioeconomics, initially inspired by this mantra. So it's taking this principle of universal love and saying, well, how about we actually apply it? What would society look like? What kind of world could we create? And, I remember when I was quite young, I sort of thinking, human beings are so crazy. We've got all this knowledge and technology, and we can control and dominate the earth, but we're using it in such a terrible way. And if we could just come to our senses, we could create a heaven on earth. That's Prout. Okay, that's actually taking that out and saying, okay, what does that mean in detail? And taking human psychology into account. And people aren't perfect. People are we do have greed, we do have hatred and anger and all these things. How do we take that into account and create a society where we can still live together in peace? And it's a beautiful idea, and we study that in our training. That's part of the philosophy that we learn about. Is not just how to be a yogi individually, but how could we create a spiritual society that really functions? Okay, another unusual source of great spiritual ideas about love. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, then the world will know peace. This is a very well-known quote. You might have heard it before. Of course, it's from Jimi Hendrix. And I'm a musician, so I have a lot of admiration for. I know he had a few problems and sadly died young because of them, largely. But he also had moments of extraordinary insight and was a very idealistic person. And this juxtaposition of power and love is tremendously important, because what I see happening in the spiritual community in California, where I live, I think there's a lot of confusion about this. you know, I've been to a lot of these kind of spiritual fairs, and you'll go and you'll see there might be something about meditation, but at the meditation table, there's a kind of a 3 people, and at the table about the tarot and your past lives and numerology and all, there's like 50 people. Okay, so even though it's supposed to be a kind of spiritual fair, most people are still looking for kind of external solutions to their problems, and I've experienced that a lot. In fact, I was in Australia. I'm going to tell you, I got a lot of crazy stories from Australia. I went to a spiritual fair in Australia when I was fairly new monk, and it was kind of like that. I had my little meditation table with some books, and then the table next to me had some fancy video, and they were talking about past lives, and I was sort of like mine was the kind of the losers table, right? And I was supposed to give a lecture there, and I you know, there were hundreds of people moving around this big thing all day, maybe it was 2 days. And I went to the sort of lecture theatre, you know, it was quite a big lecture theatre, and I was going to give my lecture. Only one person came, and he ended up becoming a monk. He's one of my favorite people. He was I initiated him into meditation later, and he was a great musician, actually. So sometimes it's you know, it doesn't matter if there's one person as long as they're the right person, right? So that taught me a lesson. Probably several. Oh, and you know, and he told me later, he said, yeah, I went to your lecture. He said, yeah, I really loved the meditation you taught me and everything. You know, we became very close. He said, but I got to tell you honestly, it wasn't a very good lecture. So I thought that was great. This, you know, life is full of wonderful little lessons. Okay. So in relation to this thing of power and love, a lot of people seem to think that spirituality is something to do with mental powers or telepathy or being able to know the future or heal people or these kind of mental powers. And somebody once asked our guru, Anandamurti was his name. He was the one who wrote all these books about Prout. Somebody once asked him, one of the monks, they asked him, said, you know, how do you, basically they were asking, how do I know if I'm progressing, right? They wanted to know if they're getting somewhere. And I just realized I didn't sing you the Sanskrit song. I'll do that in a minute. They said, you know, how do we measure spiritual progress? I mean, is it when if I have some sort of healing power, or I can read people's minds or something like that? And the guru became a little bit serious. He said, these kind of powers have nothing to do with spirituality. He said they're mundane. He said the only measure of spiritual progress is the periphery of your love. So periphery means like the outside of the diameter, right? How big is the circle of love that you feel for real? Like in the metta meditation, you're expanding this feeling a lot. How big is that? That's the measure of real spirituality. And I thought this was great because it's so simple and really clarifies things. So how do we do that? How do we expand the periphery of our love? Well, first I'm going to sing you the song, all right? So this, I believe, is possibly, at least, the oldest song in the world. Oh, we got some, oh, no, we got all this is the Greek, mostly Greek, all the different ideas about love. The philosophers have been talking about this for a really long time. We had to study Plato's symposium on love in university, I remember. You're very well read, Ananda. So this song, Sangha Chadwang. So this song is all about how we're all moving together on this spiritual path. It's not about me and my ego and whether I'm spiritually enlightened or not. It's about all of us. And I love that concept. And so it goes like this. And we often sing it at the beginning of group meditation because it's a song of spiritual unity. I'll just sing it once. We often sing it 3 times, but I'm just going to give you a listen to what I think might be the oldest song in the world. Oh, I've got to change something on my computer. Give me a second. Otherwise, it'll sound weird because the computer thinks the guitar is some kind of enemy, which it's not. I've really got to do this, otherwise it's not so good. Okay, now it should sound better. Okay. Sangachadram, Sangvadadram, Sango Anansi Janatam Devavaga Jatapure Sanjanana Upasati Samanivai Akuti Samana Hridaya Nivaha Samanamastu Omano Jatavaha Susaha Sati. So somebody or some people in the ancient forests of India were singing that, yeah, maybe 14, 15,000 years ago. Probably a different tune, very likely. But those are the words. Oh, I'm glad you liked it. Some of our other courses, you get to learn this stuff. We've got a new, really, really good Sanskrit teacher who's offered to teach some Sanskrit classes, basic Sanskrit. She can actually speak it like nobody speaks Sanskrit. It's been a dead language for thousands of years, but she's a Sanskrit scholar, and she's going to do some special classes on it sometime. You'll hear about it. So there was a little bit more I wanted to say about this periphery of your love. We're going back to the pictures here. Okay, there's Jimmy, and okay. So how do we expand this periphery of our love? So, well, one of the ways that the Buddhists do it is through metta meditation. The meditation we teach on, focusing on this idea of limitless love is absolutely a way of doing this. That works. Chanting kirtan, again, with this, and there's a dance that goes with it. Chanting this idea of universal love, that everything is a manifestation of the divine. That's a very powerful way to do that. But also, well, there's a couple of things. There's one thing missing. I want to go back to it. Hang on. That's it. Yes. This idea of self-sacrifice, which, again, the Buddhists talk about, but, really doing something that helps other people, dedicating your life to service and creating a better world. This is not just good for the world, it's really good for you. I had a student, one of my first meditation students in Australia, and he was a doctor, and young guy, very good looking, and people, he had friends, and he had, a great career ahead of him. But I taught him to meditate. He was meditating very regularly. He was very strict in his practice. But he was always coming to me complaining about how unhappy he was. And I got a little bit annoyed with this. I just sort of got impatient. I thought, this guy is he's so lucky. His life, most people would think this is the dream life. I'm a young professional. I got, life's ahead of me. I'm healthy and all that. And one day I told him, I said, look, your problem is you're always thinking about yourself. Why don't you go somewhere where people have real problems and help them and get over yourself, basically. So it was uncharacteristically blunt for me to say this. Honestly, I don't go around saying that kind of thing, but it kind of, it just kind of burst out. It was a kind of a weird, intuitive piece of rudeness, I think, perhaps. So I kind of confronted him with this. And I didn't plan it. A week later, he came back and he said, Dada, I really thought about what you said, and I've arranged to go to volunteer in a poor village in India as a doctor for 6 months. And I'm doing it. And I thought, okay, I should be careful what I say. People take me too seriously. And he did it. And he went away, he'd gone for 6 months. He came back. And the minute I saw him, his face had changed. And I thought, this is amazing. This guy's spent 6 months not feeling sorry for himself, and it's done wonders for him. And he talked about it, of course, and he told our little group about his experience. He said it was so good for me. He said I went there with this attitude, you know, I'm the white hero going to save the poor village people in India. And after a while, I finally realized that I was the one who was lucky, that I had the opportunity to help them because it changed me. And they were serving me by giving me the opportunity to serve them. And he really realized something, that he couldn't get through his meditation. He'd been meditating for a year or two trying to, you know, resolve his issues or whatever. But what he really needed to do more than anything was go out and do something for somebody else and overcome this self-centeredness, essentially. And it's common. It's very common. And I have to say, I see it a lot in the meditation community or in the spiritual community. People trying to go to workshops and all this, trying to solve their problem. The problem is that they're selfish. It's kind of harsh, but it's very true in many situations. So that's why our guru in India, he established a whole social service organization. He said, look, you're not just here to sit around and meditate and not worry about other people's suffering. That's self-centered. You're supposed to be, you know, developing universal love. Get out there and help people. And he initiated all these social education programs and children's homes and all these. We have all these projects around the world which are a manifestation of that. But it's a part of spiritual practice to actively help other people, because it takes us beyond our, you know, self-obsession and ego. It's very, very psychologically and emotionally healthy, and it makes you happier. I mean, I have a really dear friend. He's from Norway. And Norway, you know, Norway is one of the most comfortable places on earth. I mean, economically, and you know, they pay for you to go to university, and they give you a nice apartment, and you've got free health care, and it's a really comfortable society, and it's very peaceful. It's very safe. It's not paradise, but it's easy. Now he grew up there. He's a Norwegian citizen. He's a monk like me. He spent most of the last 20 years living in a hut in Africa. Various huts, or maybe a little house, but living very simply, running these amazing service projects that are helping thousands of people. There's one that's brought water supply to these villages that you know, it's reaching like 20,000 people, and he's just doing incredible work. And when I talk to him, he just says, I've never been so happy in my life. He says, this is what I was born for. You know, he could be sitting in his perfect apartment in Norway and having the luxurious life, but he really doesn't care. He wants to feel that his love is flowing through him, and he's a kind of saintly guy, actually. He's really, everybody likes him a lot. Lovely guy, very humble, which is rare. So this I want to tell you about, but I'm going to go back. I got this in the wrong order. Okay, I've got to tell you a story about this fellow. So these are two great yogis. You may know about them. Shri Ramakrishna was he died in 1890, I think. And he was very famous in India as a really great saint and amazing yogi. And his most famous disciple was Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, in the turban. And Vivekananda was the first Indian yogi to come to the United States. In 1893, I think, he came here. And he spoke at a big conference and he was like super charismatic. And he became kind of instantly famous. And you can find even today, there are Ramakrishna mission ashrams in different cities around the United States. There's one in Berkeley, a few miles from where I live. And that was all his initiative. And actually, he laid the groundwork for Yogananda, who came later. And he got a lot of support from the Ramakrishna mission. Vivekananda was dead by this time, but Paramahansa Yogananda came here when was it, Krishnendu, in the 1920s or 1930s?
Yes, it was October the 19th, 1920. They
Oh.
just had the 100-year anniversary ceremony.
I asked the right person. Thank you. So Yogananda came, and he's very well known in the US, and a lot of people think maybe he was the first Indian yogi to come here, but actually Vivekananda came earlier, and he actually kind of paved the way in some ways. So the story about Vivekananda goes like this: when he was with the Guru in India, a young man, and he had been studying and doing his meditation, and they were living very simple ashram life, and he was like the perfect disciple. He was like did everything just right, and brilliant young man. And one day, Ramakrishna told him, Vivekananda, he had a different name then, but Mukunda, I think was his name. Mukunda, I have very special work for you today. And he had with him, the Guru had with him a live chicken. He said, take this chicken and go into the forest to some place where nobody is watching, where you're all alone and nobody's watching you, and kill the chicken. And Mukunda, means Vivekananda, he was a bit shocked because this is against their principle. They didn't eat meat and they didn't kill chickens. So, but the Guru told them to do it. So he said, okay, he took the chicken, disappeared into the forest. And the other disciples are kind of looking on and wondering, oh, this is unusual. What's happening here? And he's gone all day. And they're sort of thinking, well, it doesn't take that long to kill a chicken. What's going on? So finally, it's almost sundown and it's getting dark, and Mukunda comes back and he's got the chicken. The chicken's fine. The chicken's quite happy. And then the Guru says, what happened? Why didn't you follow my instructions? And he says, Guruji, I tried. I went in the forest and I prepared to kill the chicken. And I remember you told me I had to find somewhere where nobody's watching me. But just as I was thinking to kill the chicken, I sensed this presence, and I felt like these two eyes were watching me, and I thought, oh, this is not the right place. So I went deeper into the forest, and more really lonely place, and I was kind of scared, but I went there, and again I was getting ready to kill the chicken, and I felt these two eyes watching me, and I felt that I wasn't alone. And wherever I went, I felt that there was this presence and somebody was watching me, and I'm sorry I couldn't kill the chicken. And the Guru said, that's very good, perfect. You have developed the awareness that you are being witnessed by the divine at all times. And he was, and he blessed him. And of course, Vivekananda was very happy, and Ramakrishna was very happy, and all the other disciples were happy because the Guru was happy, so he's not going to give them a hard time. But guess who was the happiest of all? The chicken.
Yeah.
So that's my story about what is actually the secret of meditation. So the secret of meditation goes like this. So this is I like this quote. This is from Anandamurti, my Guru. There is a heavenly shower of grace. But suppose that you are holding an umbrella over your head. Will you be drenched by that shower? Oh no. They who want to enjoy this shower of grace must remove this umbrella of ego that's over their heads, and then they'll be drenched by the divine shower. Okay. So what he's really saying is that, well, there's a lot to be said about ego and egotism. So he goes into that a lot in other places, but we are the ones who are preventing ourselves from experiencing this divine bliss. And it's our ego feeling, our sense of superiority or inferiority, our sense of separation is what's preventing us from feeling this. And there's actually a kind of simple technique to help us to feel that. And this he describes in a discourse as the secret of meditation, and it's kind of what Vivekananda realized. It's like this: when you're meditating, so you're sitting there and you're repeating your mantra and you're trying to feel that, okay, I'm feeling this limitless love all around me. I'm trying to think about divine, infinite love. The trick is to reverse that. So rather than feeling I'm thinking about the infinite limitless consciousness. Feel that you are being thought of. Just like the eyes were watching Vivekananda, right? Rather than him trying, oh, I'm thinking about God, God's thinking about me. Oh, okay, that's different. You become the object, and the subject is the creator of the universe. So when you're sitting in meditation, just close out your eyes for a second and imagine this. Feel it, in your meditation, rather than trying to imagine limitless love, feeling that this limitless entity that's made of love, if you like, or is pouring down limitless love on you all the time, and you are the object of the undivided attention of the creator of the universe. And you are not being judged. You are just, there's just this limitless, endless rain of love falling down on you if you could just surrender your ego and let it happen and notice it. And feel that you are being thought of at all times. So you are being meditated on all the time, actually. And that is, if you can remember that and really let it really clicks for you, it'll transform your meditation practice. I remember I have a wonderful student who's actually, he's the you remember I told you about the one person who came to my talk in Australia, and then he ended up becoming a monk like me. So I taught him meditation. He became a monk. Years later, he taught a 12-year-old boy in Berlin in Germany. He taught him meditation, initiated him to meditation. He became a really great yogi. He's an amazing, one of the best yoga teachers in the world right now. And I became his teacher because his teacher died, actually. This lovely fellow from Australia died young. So I taught him this technique. He had been meditating since he's 12. Now he's 38 or something. So about 5 years ago, I taught him the secret of meditation in a retreat, a 1-week silent retreat with 20 people in Brazil. And this fellow, his name's Kailash, he told me, he said, we were silent for a week, so I couldn't tell you about this. But he said, after you explained this idea, and he's been meditating twice every day for maybe 20 years at that point. He said, that completely transformed my practice. Something clicked, and I felt like this sort of awareness of God all the time ever since. He's completely high. So if you can get this, it really makes a big difference. The secret of meditation. And that is pretty much the last thing I'm going to tell you in this. Though I think I'm going to sing a song, unless you've got some questions. Any thoughts, questions, observations, suggestions? All right, I'm going to sing you a song. And it's kind of about this idea that it's related to this secret of meditation thing. So I was thinking about this concept that, okay, here am I trying to meditate on the divine all these years. I kind of forget that the divine is meditating on me all along. So I just thought, well, okay, what if I were to kind of, stop asking God questions and just shut up for a minute and listen to what God's telling me. So this is kind of what I might hear. This is what I imagine God might say to me. I want you to know that I'll always be your friend, for I know what it means to be alone. If you want, I can show that I really do intend to take care of this seed that I have sown. Love is everywhere, can you feel it? Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere, can you feel it? Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere, can you feel it? Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere. Everywhere. Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere. If you learn to see true, the sunlight and the dew will always appear as something new. I am right before you, but you are always looking through to this world where I'm hidden from your view. Love is everywhere, can you feel it? Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere, can you feel it? Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere, can you feel it? Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere. Everywhere. Love is everywhere. Love is everywhere. So that's my little one-way conversation with God. And that, I think, is where we're going to conclude. So that's it. This is the last of this series of 10 on the powers, the secret powers of meditation.